Hello, world, and long time welcome back to the Podcast Monitor app. Um, this is episode 44. Last time we created the unit test and made updates to the different stubs and kind of things that are required for us to use the unit test. So that should all be ready to use. And this time we are going to actually implement the controller. So let's get started. And the first thing I actually need to do is update some of the tasks that I didn't update. So as you can see, we're currently on the deliverable 24 for the controller. We completed 23 and previously. We still have open in progress marked for this one, and this one's still considered open even though it's complete. And we're now currently on this one. So I'm going to come in here and we'll complete this one as well as the UT. And we'll mark that one in progress. The other thing I noticed was that we go from tasks 29 to 39 and 40, so I misnumbered them. But that doesn't really matter, right? It's just kind of like a quirk as long as they're unique. So we just don't have any tasks 30 through 38. We could reuse those numbers, but honestly, not much of a big deal. So come over here and save this first, I guess. So pops up, right? We just updated those, so we'll just say git commit. Updated task status. Okay. So the controller UTV finished last time, and it's very simple. These are all collapsed tweets. Right, essentially we're creating the controller, we're giving it the stub RSS requester so that we get specific data. We're giving it, for the API, we're giving it this fake Twitter API so that we're not actually tweeting things out. And then we're creating the date that we want to use based off of the stub data. And then we're basically just calling the controller using the run day for the day that we want, and giving it the feeds, which we're giving it a stub. This stub feeds here, which only has the specific ones that are in the stub data. And then what we expect to happen is when we inspect the timeline here, which is right, so we're getting the timeline, basically the tweets from the API. We're expecting it to basically contain all these tweets. We're forming the tweets that using the fake API as well. Has an ID, a text, and a parent. So, right, we have the 0th tweet is going to say this, today they released, and then list these podcasts. And then the other tweets are going to be parented to that. All of them are parented to this tweet. And they have, continual IDs from there. And then we have here the information basically from the episode, right? So we have the Cooligans. This is name of the episode here. And then we say that this Cooligans episode can be found. And we give it, in this case, it's only on the main feed. So you can find it on Apple and Spotify using these links. When we have the God Bless Football episode here, this can be found on both the main feed as well as the Stupidity feed, so we have the links for all those. Right, so that's what we expect to be able to kind of do with all this, and now we just need to implement the controller. And there are two methods in the controller. We have the init method and the run day method. The init method takes those two, the requester and these, which are stubbed for testing. But otherwise, they'll be set to none in the kind of production environment. We're not going to end up sending those in externally. We're just going to detect that they're none and then we'll set them. So the run day will kind of do then everything else. I'm going to close out this stuff for now. Just leave this open. So we prototyped it and we got it working in a previous episode. I think it was actually, let's check the log real quick. So prototype we got essentially working 2 episodes ago, episode 42. So if you want to kind of see it working in general, you can go back and check that out. But this is basically the kind of the prototype of doing it. And so when you look at the essence kind of what we have here, we grab the feed, the file, and just read it using load because it's a JSON file. We then use the feed parser to parse it. We use the feed parser here to parse specific feeds. In this case, right, we're parsing just this one feed. Down here, we're parsing all the feeds. We're setting up a date. We're also creating a filter, and we can use the filter. So if we parse all of them, right, and then here it's kind of looping through all the feeds here and then filter them by date. So that's something we're going to want to do. And then down here, we have some episode filtering and stuff. And then down here, we're setting up the message factory that we're going to use to create kind of like, this is for the main message. And then we go through all the episodes and we create the episode messages here. And then this is what kind of tweets them out. And this is using, all right, so it grabs the secrets that we need for the Twitter API. It grabs the kind of the Twitter class here as well as the Twitter API class to use the real stuff, right? So in the case of the UT, we're passing in the fake Twitter API, and in the case here, we're passing in the real Twitter API. So just as a quick kind of background refresher there, this is basically just a wrapper for the API. So this is pulling in from Twitter API. So the Twitter API, right, pulls in Tweepy, so this is the specific wrapper for Tweepy, and what that allows us to do is have this fake one, which has the same methods that we're using, and instead of in here calling into API, which is the Tweepy API, it allows us to set up something for testing, right? And then the Twitter class here, it actually only uses this for the type checking. But basically the pass-in API is what is saved, and then that is used, and we call either update status or the user timeline, and we do the functionality in here, right? So this is the functionality, the other ones are wrappers. So this is basically everything that we kind of want to kind of do here. And so let's start out by updating the controller, and we'll come in here. And basically what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to create, we said we had the feed parser, the filter, the message factory, the Twitter class. And so let's create members of controller for that. So we'll do parser, self.filter, self. Did I just call it message factory? Or did I have a shorter name? Factory. I'm going to call it message factory just so it's clear what it's doing. And we'll add the underscore here. And we'll say self dot Twitter equals none. So now what we need to do... So these are all the classes that we should be needing. And you know what? I will... save that and just commit that. So we'll say git commit, and we'll say added needed class members to controller. Okay. So now let's start creating them, right? So the first one we have is the parser. So from parser, so that's the feed parser, import feed parser, right? And so we have two parsers, the RSS parser and the feed parser. Pull up the diagram. So the feed parser is the whole parser. The RSS parser is this here. And this is what's going to, so we have the requester, the parser, and the feed parser is going to use the requester to make a request. The parser is going to convert it into this dictionary and then package it into the feed, which is what is outputted from our feed parser here, right? So we have the feed parser here. So we'll say feed parser, and now this requires a requester interface, the RSS requester interface, as well as the RSS parser, right? And so we don't have a stub parser, right? So we passed it in. If we look at the feed parser here, so we pass in both of these, and then we're going to do the same sort of thing here, right? Where, so in this case, the requester, if it's not passed in, it creates it. Same thing with the parser. And that was because we were determining at the time if this parser, which uses this XML tree, was using anything from the XML definitions and stuff that we might not want to call out to, which we determined we weren't, which is why we don't have a fake one of those, but we do have the requester, which inherits from the stub interface, or from the requester interface, and then we have the stub, right, which also inherits from it and returns just basic data that we're using here. So in this case, we look at the hint again, right? So we don't need to set the parser because that's going to be set, but we do want to set in the past requester the same way we were doing here, because in the case of the test, it is going to be passed in. So there's two ways we could do it. We could say, what is it? It's just requester, right? Yeah. Requester, and we could say that is equal to requester if requester is not none, else. And then we're going to need to come up here and go from RSS requester input that, and then we'll create a new one here, right? So we could do it in one line like this, but what we should do is we should say we'll say if requester is none, then we'll do the requester is equal to this. And then now we can just say requester equals requester, right? So now we've set up the feed parser, and I'll do all of you know what, whatever. I'll just do them all in different commits for the heck of it. And so we'll do git commit setting parser member. How do you set it up? Setting up parser member. All right, now we got to do the filter. So, like I was saying, we have the filter here, right? We look at this. This one, it's really just methods. I mean, it could honestly be static if we wanted it to, because it doesn't. It doesn't have any kind of method data, but it's not. So we will. Is it just all right? So filter. So that'll be from filter import filter, and we'll set that one up here too. Git commit am setting up filter member, and then we have the message factory here. From message factory import message factory, And we'll just set that up. And I mean, honestly, so the reason why I'm setting them up here, while they don't really have to be, they could just, initialize them in here. This way they're only initialized once. And they can be used. So in theory, if you wanted to kind of run it for previous days or kind of run a bunch of stuff, you could do that pretty easily. So setting up message factory member. And then the last one is, again, we're going to use this here. So we need to come up here and go from Twitter, import Twitter. And we're also going to need, for this, because it's going to be similar, import Twitter API. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to say if Twitter API is none, then we'll go Twitter API equals Twitter API, and that's going to need the secrets, right? So similar to the prototype here, we have the that's interesting. All right. So for the Twitter API here, right, we're importing the secrets from the private Twitter secrets, right? So that's something that's not checked in because those are our kind of private things. So I'm going to put that up here as like a separate thing than like the regular classes. So now we're saying here, if it's none, we're going to go secrets. And, now we have the real Twitter API, and so we're literally just passing this into here. So we're just going Twitter, and this needs the API. So we can say Twitter API equals Twitter API, and we'll do git commit am, setting up Twitter member. All right, so now I want to do two quick cleanup things. I'm just going to move this up here so that we're taking these passed in variables and doing them all in one spot. I'm also, since these are all just the same name, saying Twitter API equals Twitter API is kind of redundant, so I'm just going to get rid of those. And then, so I'm just going to say git commit am refactored constructor. Okay, great. So now we've set up this, and now we have everything that we need available, right? So now we just need to basically take all this kind of logic that's in here. We now have all these things. We have the date that we want from the controller here. We have all these different classes that we're calling with the different functions. And we're also getting passed in the feeds file. So we can now come in here and start implementing this. So I'm going to just copy this part over. I don't want to I'm not going to just copy everything from here, because if you remember 2 episodes ago when we were doing this, it wasn't necessarily the kind of most it's not like it's a prototype. It's not really the cleanest code. It's meant to be thrown away, right? So I might refer back to it, especially if I'm kind of like, oh, hey, what do I want to do here to jog my memory? But there are a few things that I kind of did in here that, right, if you look at this is kind of messy. And so there's a few things that are done in here, right? Like I marked this, whatever I was doing here should be done for all. So I'm going to kind of code it fresh and use that as just kind of a reference. So I do need to import this JSON loads function, and I'm going to use the same mechanism that I always use, right? So you can actually see it in the controllers easier where, right, I'm importing unit test, then I'm importing Python modules, then I'm importing here what I'm doing to make sure I can import stuff from around because of the way Python packages things, and then I'm not using a traditional package mechanism. and then I input things that I'm using to help, and then I'm inputting the thing that matters, right? So this is kind of the test structure. For the normal structure, it's going to be, importing Python stuff and then importing my stuff, with the one distinction that I think I'm going to make is I'm going to keep these up here, because if you were to reuse this, while you can just leave, that's the way, you can just leave this in here, right? You just have to provide your own file in the private area here. You have to do that because that file isn't checked in. And so I kind of want to make that like at least somewhat obvious. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say from JSON import load. All right. So now I have the data here, and I need to pass it into the parser, right? So I'm going to do self.parser dot get feed, right? And then so this right here takes a feed metadata object. So I need to come in here and go from feed metadata import feed metadata, right? So this is a class. This was something that I'll probably refactor at some point as I continue to learn more and more about Python. But this is a class that basically it acts like a dictionary. I coded it in a way to by overriding the dunder get items or get item, and does a validation that I want to do, right? So there's better ways to do that. It's kind of like, or well, there's more standard ways to do that, I guess. But so it basically takes a dictionary, right? And so the feeds here, right, is a list of what basically when JSON loads it, it's going to be a list of dictionaries, right? So that's what this data is here. This is a list of dictionaries, and this wants specific feeds, right? So basically, if we were to come here and we were to loop over the data in each dictionary in there, we could then take it and go feed metadata D, and this would construct a feed metadata object. This feed metadata object here, so I'll just call it F for a second, and I'll put them both in the loop. Right, so here we got this, and it wants a feed metadata object, right? And then this will return the feed, right? So basically, for each dictionary that we have in this data, we can construct this object, pass it to get feed, and get a feedback, right? And so we can take this here, and we don't need this temporary variable because we're just using that there. So we can get rid of this line, and now we have just a simple line, but we want to collect these into a list. So we could create a list and then append them all in, but since this is Python, the easier way to do that would just be to say feeds is equal to, and then create a list comprehension, and do feeds equals to the value is going to be the self.parser.getFeed feed metadata D, and we're going to do this for D in data. All right, so this is the value that we want saved, and then we're doing it for this loop, right? So these do the exact same thing. Well, they don't do the exact same thing because this one doesn't save it into the list, right? So just if you're unfamiliar with list constructs, right? So we could have this feeds here, create an empty list, and then instead of saving, or saving this here either way, we could just do feeds.append feed, right? And so now these two things do the exact same thing. Obviously, this is much simpler to look at if you're familiar with list constructs. I could put it in one line, actually. I haven't come up with I haven't decided on a line limit or a character limit for the lines. So, this, sometimes if it was super long, I might move things around differently. Really, the long part's this here, but since I want, this is where that needs to go, that is how I will do that. So, I'm going to, let's see, what time are we at right now? So right now we're 26 minutes in. So I'm not going to get through this whole thing today. You'll have to, we'll have to do like a part 2. So I am going to commit these things kind of like one at a time. So it's more obvious than just saying, hey, a bunch of this stuff was done, right? I want a different commit for each. So, parsing all feeds. Okay. So now we have that. So now what we need to do is we're going to filter them down to the specific day, right? So we're going to come in here and we want the filter, and the filter in range, or is in range? On date is what I want. So I want on date, and then I need to give it a feed, and I need to give it a day, right? So we're basically going to use another list comprehension here to update the feeds, because basically the thing is, right, they have like 100 or whatever, and it kind of really slows down the comparisons. So if I filter it down, then there's one to 5 episodes on each feed, so it makes the comparison go significantly faster, which was a bug we ran into during the prototyping. So now here I'm going to say for feed in feeds, right? So once again, I'm now looping through, right? And in theory, if I really wanted to make it simpler, or really wanted to like shorten it, even though it would be much less clear, I could actually take this here and I could move this kind of port loop inside of this loop, right, and loop over the D data, and then basically take this information and pass it directly where I'm using feed here. But I'm not going to do that because that's, like I said, not very clear. So then day here is going to be equal to date. So now we've basically filtered down everything to the date that we are concerned about, that we're running, that we're going to tweet about. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say git commit filtering to desired date. All right. And I didn't save it. That's why there's nothing to commit. Okay. So now the next thing we need to do is we need to essentially construct the messages and do kind of some more filtering, right? So I'm going to pull up the prototype to show, and this is where I'm going to kind of deviate probably from it a bit. So in here, right, I know I'm going to need to create this into a string to be able to pass it into the podcast list of the message factory. So we have the factory, right? We can call this method. We already have, but we have to actually collect all episodes, right? So we need all the episodes. And here we basically use the difference. So we loop through and we basically got a list of all the episodes. Then we took all the episodes and we went through and we created messages for each of them. And when we were doing that, we were basically kind of doing more intersections. And I want to take all of that and isolate it to kind of blocks of code, because then I can always pull it out into functions if I want to refactor it. I mean, I could code it that way initially too. So what I'm going to do, I want to do all the filtering essentially in once, and then I want to, when I have everything filtered, then construct all the messages so I don't end up with as much of this mess. Which, if like you can read through this and wouldn't be too difficult to necessarily understand if you're reading through it, hopefully. But it's, if you look at it, it's not very clear. And if I were to try to refactor this into a method, it would be much more difficult the way this is written, right? So I want to code it differently than that to start with. All right. And so what time are we at? We're at about a little over 30. So we're just going to do a little bit more, and then we'll call it quits, and I'll figure out when I want to do the next episode. So make sure if I sent you the text, let me know so I can text you again if you enjoyed watching. And if you found it on somewhere I posted it, let me know there as well so I know to make sure I post it there again. All right. And if you found it on YouTube, like, subscribe, and do the things that you're supposed to do for that. So, okay. So let's collect all the episodes, right? And so basically, we have this concept for the feeds of the main channel and the sub channels, right? We only actually have one main channel, even though after everything's completed, an update to this would be to add a second main channel, which will be the main channel of the main show, where sometimes they'll post, or like the South Beach session ones, for example, are now posted there and not here. But we're not going to worry about that right now. And so that was what we kind of did up in here, where to get all the episodes, we went through the main feed, we got a copy of the episode list, and then when we went through the other feeds, we found all the episodes that weren't in it, and then we added them in, right? So that's essentially kind of what we are going to want to do here as well, right? So we want to get all the episodes. We want to start with... This is why I actually wish I had installed... I think it'd be interesting... I mean, not for this one, because I haven't been using it the entire time, but I think it would be interesting if I had installed GitHub, the Copilot. And if I wrote these comments, if it would actually be able to figure it out based off of the rest of the project, what it should do here. But alas, I don't have it installed. So start with episodes from main feed, and then add episodes from subfeeds that aren't in main feed. Now, we could make this generic to start with, right? So in here, we only have we just basically say the main feed is the first feed, and then we go through and we remove it from the list of feeds that we have, and then we kind of add everything else in to get all the episodes. We could do it another way, which is to say we could go through and basically, right, they have in it a feed has the metadata, and the metadata has the type, and the type is either main or sub. So we could go through, we could filter it down. We could basically grab anyone that is a main feed, and then we could combine those, and then we could go through the sub feeds, and then add all those in, right? And so, do I want to do that? That construct would make it easier to add in another main feed. However, the message factory isn't really set up, so it would kind of get confused. So essentially, we have to kind of operate with the assumption that there is only one main feed. And there's two ways we could do that. We could either select a specific feed as the main feed, or we could... we could basically, combine them into the main feed, but that doesn't really work. We could select one as the main feed, or we could just grab the first main feed. And so you know what? I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna say we're gonna we're going to grab first main feed, right? And so to do that, we're just basically going to loop through feeds. Right, so we're not going to use a list construct. So we're going to say main feed equals none. Then we're going to go through feeds, and if for feed and feeds, if feed, and then here we have metadata, which is all underscored, I believe. Yeah, and then we have type. So we're just doing metadata type equals main, and this is double equal. Then we will set main feed equal to feed, and we will break. And then if we get out of the loop, and we don't have a main feed, so if main feed is none, then we can basically just take any feed as the main feed. And so then we'll just say that feeds 0 equals main, or I got that backwards. Main feed equals feed 0. Right? And then the only issue here is if there are no feeds. But if there are no feeds, we'll probably want to return much earlier. So you know what? I'm going to just add if feeds is an empty list. Let's just raise an error. We'll just say, well, yeah, let's just raise an error for now. Or raise an exception. So we'll say raise an exception. No feeds found. And if that happens, that's in the use case that we're using for, that's kind of a big deal. So, all right. So basically, we're grabbing the first. We're grabbing a main feed, right? Grab first main feed if available, and then. So now actually after that, then we're going to come in here and we're going to get all the episodes from the main feed. And so we're going to say all episodes equals main feed. So the other thing that we have is this episodes list. So we go to feed, we have, the other thing we have here is episodes. And we're going to create a copy of that so that we're not altering what's in there. And now we want to loop through. Now feed has an equals method. So what we can do is we can basically come in here. We could say for feed in feeds. And we can skip the main feed. So if feed is equal to main feed, then we can continue. Otherwise, we basically want to get the episodes, right? So episodes equals feed episodes dot copy for now. And now this is where we want to use the filter, right? So now we have all the episodes, and we have the episodes for this feed, and we want to add in the ones to all episodes that aren't already in there, and we already have a method that'll do that, right? So here in the difference method, if we give it two feeds, check and against, right? And so we're returning a feed with the return data. The return data is from check. And I guess we could... So just to finish this. So we go through all the episodes in check. And if that episode is not in against, then we keep it. All right? And then we add in all those episodes here. So basically... the against here has to be the main feed, because the episodes that we want to come out of the difference are going to have to come from the check, right? Which is the subfeed, right? So we want to go through the subfeed. Any episodes that are not in the main feed, we want to add in here and return. And as a bonus, we're keeping the metadata here. So that's actually interesting because we can probably use this later, which is not what I think I did in the prototype. So this is going to be the filter dot difference self dot filter dot difference. And so we were saying the check feed. Okay, I would have to make an update to do that. So check feed against main feed. So if I wanted to do that, if I wanted to kind of make that update, I would actually need to update the filter to, instead of operating on feeds, but I do want it to operate on the feeds, and returns a feed. Yeah, okay, that gets complicated. Okay, so now I have this exclusive feed. I actually can get rid of this because I don't need that. And now, because I now want to take the episodes from here and add them in. So I want to say all episodes and add in the exclusive feed episodes. Right, so I basically want to add that list on top, which is, so now if we just, look against what the prototype we were doing, essentially, yeah, it's the same thing we were doing. That was just this is just for the print. So yeah, we were just basically grabbing here, and for the name, that was also just for the print. So we literally were just looping through. We did the difference, the feed. We didn't have the skip because we removed it from here, and then we were just adding the episodes in like this. So we added this line, and we also did this on a separate line, right? This could be one line here if we then move this up there. For now, I'm going to keep it as is. All right, I'm going to commit this as it is. We've hit the 45-minute mark, so that's all I kind of want to do lengthwise for today. So we're going to say collecting all episodes into a list. All right, I think that is going to be good for now on this. And so what do we still have to do left? We still have to basically, we have a list of all episodes. We can now construct from that the main message, and now we have to figure out from all these episodes which different feeds they actually live on. Are they only on the main feed, or are they on any of the sub feeds, right? And so that actually might make a case to update this and remove the feed from the main feed. I feel like I'm falling right into what I did in the prototype, even without looking at it, but we'll figure that out later. And so next time we will add the rest of the code to complete this, and we'll run it against a test, and then we can go ahead and make any updates. So until then, actually, hold on, not yet. I almost forgot because it's been so long. Let's go ahead and tag this. We'll say git tag ep44. No, wrong one. This one. All right. So yeah, no, we got that tagged. Okay. So yeah, so that will be all for this time. And then so until next time, see ya.